Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to Data Platform Downunder. On behalf of myself and Martin Catherall, who we both co-host the Data Platform Downunder, thank you for coming along to the August month's session. For this month, we've got Hamish Watson coming to us from Christchurch, who's going to take us through database reliability engineering. Is the DBA extinct? You may already have your thoughts on this. We'll find out as the session goes on. So a couple of little announcements. This session is being recorded and will be made available once the session has been finished on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel, where you can come back and you can watch this session as well as all of the other sessions that we've previously hosted and uploaded so that you can continue your learning on all things data platform. Some of you may or may not be aware, but on Saturday, the 30th of September, in Brisbane, we are running Data Saturday Brisbane. What we've got 15 sessions. We've got a dedicated track just on Fabric, where we've got 5 sessions. We've got a dedicated track for analytics and reporting, and we've got a dedicated track on data and AI. Of those 15 speakers, we've got 11 MVPs. We've got 3 international speakers. So it's a great way for us to restart our in-person events back here in Brisbane after so long. And we've got a Microsoft CAT team member as part of those presenters. And we've got a couple of local and interstate presenters to round out the 15. If you would like to come along and register, the link is available for Data Saturday Brisbane. The registrations are via Eventbrite. We've got some of the sponsors that we've got here, but also on the Friday, we've got a pre-con day where full day of paid training, where we've got international speaker and consultant Ginger Grant, who's going to be talking to us on enterprise data solutions with Power BI and the Azure Cloud. Okay, because for that, it is covering Power BI. Fabric is thrown into the mix as well. So a fantastic full day of training where you can learn from an international speaker and consultant. Registrations for that are also via Eventbrite. Everything is available from the Data Saturday Brisbane site. So we look forward to seeing you on the day. Hamish is one of our international speakers coming across, and you're seeing him this session this month. This isn't his session for next month, so it's a whole new session. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Hamish and he can take us through today's session.
Nice one. Thank you so much, Warwick. And actually, oh no, I just realized one thing, but that's okay. First of all, I'm trying to do stuff off screen. Firstly, thank you, Warwick and Martin, for what you both do in the community, like specifically running this session, because it's been a inspiration for me personally. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't know you two blokes. Now, quick question: can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, we've got the start of your slide deck.
Woohoo! Okay, alrighty. Yeah, sweet. All right. I got a pop-up going, hey, do you actually want to do the screen sharing thing? Shall we quit? And I was like, no, teams, no. Anyway, g'day everyone. Welcome to my session. Database reliability engineer. Is the DBA extinct? Now, the cool thing is I was a DBA for between 10 and 15 years, depending. And by no means was I very good at it. I was pretty reasonable. I dropped a production database in my time, so I feel like that sort of gives me rites of passage. Now this session, it's like Warwick said, it's kind of up to you to decide whether or not the DBA is extinct. I'll leave my thoughts for the next hour or so. But yeah, anyway, that's me when I looked a bit tidier. I've been in IT for 20 odd years. Basically, bringing DevOps to databases and the masses is a personal passion of mine, and allowing people, or rather companies, to understand both data and Azure. And I've got to be honest, I'd probably swap Azure with cloud, because these days I'm doing stuff in AWS and GCP, not just Azure. Right, I'm bringing that down there. Yeah, I run my own company, helping people understand data and cloud and DevOps. At the end of the day, I'm a technologist who understands business value, because everything I do around data, or actually infrastructure, I always think of what is the business value that we can derive from this. But let's be honest, I just like to make stuff go. I'm a VMware expert. That's kind of nice. VMware just allow me to play with all their latest and greatest things. I come at it from a cloud and data perspective. I'm a friend of Redgate. If you don't know who Redgate are, they're a database and DevOps company. They're dedicated to both, which is kind of cool. And yeah, I'm MVP. So that's kind of nice as well. Those are my details. Look, this session, basically when I formed my company way back when, and I was lucky enough to work with Warwick for some of that time, I thought about what was the offering that, you know, I and we together could do. And it was kind of at that time that a book was written around database reliability engineering by Lane Campbell and Charity Majors. And I actually reached out to Charity Majors, and it was kind of cool, you know, had a conversation with Charity around what DRE was about. And the thing was, I went and bought the book. It was one of the first books I bought at the time, because I was trying to formalize what data and DevOps was about. I had my own perception and ideas, but, you know, seeing what someone had written about, and Charity Majors, you know, I'm a huge fan of what Charity does in both database reliability engineering and also site reliability engineering. And yeah, so for us, you know, I reference this book because at the core of it, data is an organization's most important asset. And, you know, I'm sort of preaching to the converted here. So hopefully someone watches this YouTube video who doesn't understand that data is our most important asset. And the thing is that the criticality of data often brings fear and reservation when working with it. You know, like as an old DBA, you know, I knew, you know, if I was deleting, you know, I should have a where clause in there. It's just second nature. And in fact, one of the best parts of my career was working with one of New Zealand's leading DBAs, who may or may not be on this call, and a huge fan of that person as well. And, you know, watching what they did, the whole premise of how they worked was around the criticality of data, but more importantly, how to tune how the business interacted with that data. The problem is that when we look at the criticality, an organization, you know, they'll restrict themselves from innovating around using that data or what have you, because they want to prevent risk. Whereas in fact, database reliability engineering is actually understanding that criticality, but also allowing the organization to innovate with their data instead of being stifled by, you know, gatekeeping and risk averse activities or even policies. And, you know, there'll be one common theme I have coming through this presentation, which is around automation, because automation, believe it or not, it alleviates our fear of what we do with the data, and it also increases the velocity of delivering value, because at the end of the day, I hate to say it, well, this might be news to your ears, you know, our end users, and this might be an online event platform hosting 180,000 users online, you know, and the thing that makes that whole system go is the data. The thing is that the automation around that, you know, the 180,000 users don't care, sadly, about the rows and columns or even the indexes that we have on there. They care about value. And I guess if you want to, you know, cut out the next 49 minutes of your life, this session is about how we deliver value. And if DBAs, if you all can deliver value and you understand that, and don't get me wrong, we're not saying that tuning indexes is not something we should do. It's 100% what we need to do, but it's a change in focus. So anyway, DBRE or DRE, I don't really care if you call it database reliability engineering and chuck a DB in there, or just call it database reliability engineering and have a DRE, don't care. But it's really derived from site reliability engineering, because that was where we look at the app layer, right? And we look at the availability, the performance, you know, how we can deal with change management and everything. And so the SRE role came out of Google, you know, and a lot of operations teams, which is where the DBA typically sits, you know, we have a similar role to this. And, you know, basically it's where we ask a software engineer to design an operational function. And so what I'm saying is that we, as operational people, i.e. a DBA, we need to embrace some of those engineering principles in our day-to-day job. Let's look at DBAs. Well, here's the deal. Our platform has evolved. You know, back in the day, where once we worked on SQL Server, we actually now work on a data platform, because we're not just about, you know, this monolithic SQL Server tucked away in, you know, a data center or an office cupboard somewhere. We're actually working on a data platform. And in fact, Microsoft has evolved the name of the SQL Server platform for very good reasons. And those reasons come about from the fact that, you know, we operate in the cloud a lot more. And the thing is, our data, when we look at data itself, you know, it can exist both on premises and in the cloud. And, you know, that data may exist on as part of a big data platform, which might be running on, you know, Kubernetes clusters somewhere. You know, that could be in the cloud. It could be, again, on premises. We may be dealing with open source services that are interfacing with cognitive and intelligent applications. And, you know, we hear about AI and machine learning and all that kind of stuff to provide, you know, predictive analytics. Well, if you're in that space, 9 times out of 10, you're generally running out of the cloud. So we need to embrace that. We also need to embrace automation, because, look, so much has changed in the past, you know, well, 10 years, but even more so in the last, you know, 3 to 5 years in this space. And it's changed for good stuff. And here's the deal. One of the reasons why I do this session is we need to learn DevOps principles, you know, and we still need to be administrative guardians of the data, but we also need to evolve, and we need to evolve from, you know, that bookkeeper type administrator of ensuring that data is safe to actually engineers, and, you know, moving on and bringing other philosophies and processes into our day-to-day activities, and, you know, for the betterment. So back in the day, my life as a DBA was generally developers would do a whole heap of stuff, and this ain't a beat up session on developers at all. They'd chuck their code over the wall, and I'd have to look at it normally on a Friday for whatever reason, and to deploy it over the weekend when an outage was okay. And often that was the first time I'd seen the code. And I think, this paradigm, whilst humorous, is actually still quite relevant, and we shouldn't be at this stage. And I think, during this session, we'll hopefully get there, that you'll see that this scenario is very much of the old world and we want to move on. Anyway, I talked a heap, introducing database reliability engineering. And look, we had very strict separation of duties between the software and the DBA, and there were reasons for this because, often, as the last slide showed, the code is thrown over the wall. And part of that is that we had very rigorous backup and recovery processes, and, we regularly tested them. The old adage, how is a DBA paid? It's not by the backups you perform, but by the recoveries that you can do. We had well-regulated security procedures, and we were fairly regularly audited, or at least I was. Maybe it was just me. But here's the deal: we had expensive database software. Buying Microsoft SQL Server was the go-to because you knew the strong durability guarantees, right? The old ACID thing, and our focus was literally, is SQL Server.exe running, is it up, and is our database running, are we able to connect to it and what have you. We also had quite expensive storage because we had to ensure that every write went to the database, and more importantly that when we read it, it was there wasn't a bit flip. I've been lucky enough, or maybe unlucky enough, in my career to have experienced a bit flip when dealing with writes around data, and I have to say it's one of the most horrible things ever, because a bit flip is where you're writing a 1 and in fact you write a 0, and that's kind of bad in data. Anyway. We had extensive controls and changes in administrative tasks, and what that means is that we used to say no a lot, because people would just come along with these, flippant ideas around how they might interact with data. They might be using an ORM to like entity framework, where they've allowed the software to write the queries. By the way, ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. It's basically where I write some code for the front end. It'll translate that and then write it as SQL code. And guess what? It didn't do it very well. And so after we've been burned so many times, and again, we are looking after the most precious resource in the world apart from our kids, which is data. And so, yeah, we got used to having quite extensive control changes by saying no. So, yeah. The funny thing is that it's a change in paradigm. And in fact, what this means is that the responsibility of data is actually shared by cross-functional teams. And what I mean by that is that we as DBAs have an opportunity and a requirement where we educate the masses around why data is important and why we shouldn't mess with it just willy-nilly. And what I mean by that is, taking developers through basically, database 101 to show, where by using indexes on tables, and also refining your queries and looking at the performance of those queries when you're writing them, we're now sharing the love. And the cool thing is that we developers are great at innovation and they're great at scripting and all those things. And in fact, we can leverage some of that because we can create safety nets. And, part of this is where the automated backup and recovery processes may actually be handled by something else, written by someone else. But in fact, we as DREs can come along and actually give our blessing. And the same with security policies and procedures. This is using the extensive knowledge that you have around data and now moving towards a more engineering focus, and again, creating cross-functional teams, creating platforms that are self-servicing. And what I mean by that is that we may have development, QA, UAT databases not actually managed by you, whereas in the past they would have. You would have refreshed them and it would have taken a week or two. Well, in fact, let's leverage some of the software engineering principles around codification and standardization and having our code and source control and actually building a platform together, right? So leveraging all those things, but also bringing our understanding of data sanctity and security policies and procedures and all those things. And yeah, let's just automate all the provisioning and deployment. So I worked with a client, with one of the people on this call. I'm going to call his name out, bugger it. Craig Ryan, one of New Zealand's leading DBAs. And, the refresh process was cumbersome only because, it was done manually. And Craig was looking after, the internal database stuff and tuning the heck out of that. And I came at it from how do we provision, this pre-prod or staging, whatever you want to call it, database. And I was in charge of deploying the code. And, what used to take a long time because people didn't understand the process was literally, 30 minutes before the production deploy, the pre-prod environment was created, the code was deployed to it, both at a data and app layer, all in conjunction. And, it was a beautiful thing. So I guess, the DRE is kind of like a modern data administrator, but the goal here is to enable the company to innovate, right, with their data while making it still safe and accessible. The other thing is that we can actually move towards a situation where our data stores are spread across disparate technologies or, the cloud to solve our data problems. We don't have to have huge monolithic SQL Server. Don't get me wrong, SQL Server might be there as our data store or our main data engine for, business applications, whatever. But, when I look at some of this, what we're doing in terms of our data, we can actually focus more on the process rather than, expensive software. And so, being able to automate and the infrastructure below our data, we sort of move away from where SQL Server.exe is the thing we focus on, whereas in fact we focus on being able to replicate and have redundancy within our infrastructure, because we can automate and bring everything up. So anyway, the premise here is being able to provide self-service. And the thing is, a talented DBA is a rare commodity, and most companies can't afford or even retain more than one or two. But if we look at incorporating DevOps and, team autonomy, basically we allow those teams to be able to properly manage their data stores, because we're going to build in all the metrics so that if something does go wrong, we've got an action sitting there. And again, this comes from engineering principles. And, whenever we have a new data store, by default, we have the backup and recovery routines associated with this. And so, again, we're helping the architectural design of data stores, and it's approved for operations by us because we still have a data type guardian role, but it can mean that teams can deploy it as they require. Now, obviously, this is the key thing here is around standards for the deployments, and we will have a say in this. We are going to provide, the safe deployment methods and test scripts for any changes done to our data. And again, this is not actually saying that a DBA function is gone. What I'm saying is this is an evolution of the DBA into a data reliability engineering role. So you could almost say I've answered the title of the session, but I'm turning it around. Thing is, when I was DBA and when I worked with DBA teams, the biggest thing that that really killed what we were doing was Toil. And Google have this great definition of what Toil's about. And basically, repetitive manual work that was quite common at the time, we've got to reduce it. We've got to get rid of it. And, we want to automate where we can. Now, don't worry, I'm a realist. You can't automate everything. But the things that we can automate mean that we can actually start moving towards the rate of change of what we are doing can be quite high, even when those changes are impactful. Because let me put it this way, if you had the ability to spin up a pre-prod environment within 30 minutes or 2 hours, right, and know that the changes that you're deploying to it are exactly the same changes that you're going to do in production, that's the level of automation that I really want to get to. And how do we get there? Well, there's some tools, back in the day, this is how developers worked. They used Team Foundation Server or Azure DevOps, whatever. Whereas, these days you can use pretty much whatever you want to use. The options are endless. I guess the key thing here is that our database definition, right? So the schema that we use, that's provisioned for the database is in source control somewhere. Could be GitHub, could be Bitbucket. I don't actually care. What I do care about is that the actual way that we provision our database is not you running a script from your laptop. It's you kicking off a job that is automated and pulls that definition from source control. This is kind of, the new world of data acquisition and transformation. And there's a whole heap of different technologies here. But underpinning this is you need to choose what's appropriate for you. I have a couple of children who are 13 years old, and they're learning Python. And the reason why they're learning Python is because I want them to be able to, see the world as it should be, where we can script and parse and automate.
It's 15 hours.
Anything that we want. And, Spark, if I look at Spark as technology, this will come in handy when you have way too much data and you need to run all of your code or algorithms in parallel. So using things like Scala might be fine, that might be your thing. But if you're more, used to, say, Python, then you might actually use PySpark when you're dealing with, Apache Spark. And I guess the thing I'm saying here is that, the landscape has moved. You know, we grab data from somewhere. It could be a CSV, it could be unstructured data from, you know, telemetry, it could be JSON, and we throw it into an engine somewhere. We work with it, you know, we ingest it, we process it, then we analyze it. So, and this is where we look at both our platform as well as our data. And in fact, there's not too much distinction, in my opinion, is that if you are dealing with data, you do need to understand the platform these days that you're dealing with. And so, yeah, dealing with things like Jenkins, Kubernetes, or Docker should be something that you're aware of and that you can work with. I always like to talk about Azure, you know, so people say to me, oh, you talk about this Apache Spark stuff, you know, what can I do in Azure, or what, you know, it's available to me. And in fact, I should actually update this to start talking to Fabric, you know, that Microsoft are doing up in Azure. But I guess for all intents and purposes, Azure Databricks is the implementation of Apache Spark on Azure. And basically, it allows us to run up a cluster where we can process large amounts of data and create workloads. It helps with both, you know, data engineering, data exploring, but also on the right-hand side of this, the visualization of data and starting to incorporate things like machine learning and, you know, AI. The thing is that we're moving, right, towards using technologies like Databricks. The reason being is because data is getting bigger. I remember being in a session in 2015 where they were talking about big data, and here we are, you know, 8 years later, and the landscape has changed, but the principles haven't, in terms of how we want to, you know, work with the data. Here's one where I think, you know, you've named your SQL Server. That's kind of cute. And, you know, we need to move away from where SQL Server is this precious pet that we have. And, you know, we look after it, we care for it, we tend for it, whereas it should just be cattle. You know, it's SQL 001, and tomorrow it might be SQL 002, rather than naming it Bart, Lisa, or Homer. In fact, I worked at a client site and they did actually call their SQL servers after, you know, Simpsons characters. Because here's the deal, we need to strive around standardization, automation, and resilience. You know, a pet server is one that you feed, you care for, and nurture it back to health when it's sick. But whereas, you know, our cattle servers, you know, they have numbers, not names. And, you know, we don't spend too much time customizing those servers. They're built from a template, which we have in source control. And we don't even need to log on to the individual hosts, because as you move on to using things like Databricks or even SQL Server running in a container, we spin it up. The persistent layer is now not SQL Server.exe. It's pulling our data from a data store somewhere. And, you know, the containerization of SQL Server is such that if your SQL Server instance within that container dies, a new one is spun up, and with caching, we can still actually have our transactions flowing through to, you know, the persistent storage that we've, you know, provisioned through code, and we've built resiliency there, rather than expensive monolithic executables running on a big VM or physical server somewhere. Thing is, you know, we might keep one of our servers around for diagnostics, you know, or forensics if we're seeing a whole heap of unusual amounts of sickness. But I guess critical to this is the idea that the components of database and data stores where we're using clusters, it's not sacred. You know, we should be able to lose any component and efficiently replace it without worry. The other thing we need to embrace is collaboration. And I know this is not something that we want to talk about as, you know, technologists, but we need to collaborate because our infrastructure, configurations, data models, scripts, everything are all part of software. And we need to embrace some of the SDLC things that software engineers have had for decades. We need to bring those into our world. And we need to code, we need to test, we need to integrate it, we need to build stuff, we need to test again and deploy. And it really is about collaborative teams because, you know, where we had silos, this really held back our delivery because there was handoff between this team to that team to the other team, and we need to eliminate the barriers across all teams. What we want to do is we want to be embedded directly into the software engineering team. We don't want to be, you know, the last caboose on the train. You know, we want to work in the same code base. We want to examine how the code is interacting with our data stores. And we also want to be able to modify that code for performance, functionality, and reliability. And removing this sort of separation means that we can actually accelerate the delivery because we're part of the design back when, you know, a requirement or functional request may come into the team. We're front and center. We're there helping. And I guess, you know, we need to stop using this as our source of truth and start using things like source control. So what's the path? Well, these are the ways you can start your DevOps. These are the ways you can start your DevOps journey, or in fact, your DRE journey. So, source control. Your code should live in source control. You need to embrace unit testing. You need to start understanding infrastructure as code. Now, don't get me wrong, you may not be the main person involved with writing infrastructure as code, but you need to understand it enough that you can contribute and have an opinion on what is being created. And of course, getting our code up into source control, getting it built, getting it tested, and then creating a standardized package of it, you need to understand continuous integration and also how we're going to release and deliver that code or value is all part and parcel of continuous delivery. And we should be part of continuous monitoring and testing because without these, we don't know what's going on in our database or our data stores or our data platform. We're just operating in the dark. One of the things I always get told is unit testing is really hard, whereas in fact, it's not as hard as you think. You know, if you are operating in, say, Microsoft SQL Server, TSQLT is free. It's a wonderful framework that you can use and create your own unit tests. Those unit tests are written in TSQL, by the way, hence the name. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to meet the people who run TSQLT in terms of creating it and running it and, you know, putting all the features into it. Amazing people who actually probably care about your data more than you do. So yeah, if you haven't looked at TSQLT, really hard URL, it's tsqlt.org, O-R-G, and it's free and it's brilliant. Right, what's this infrastructure as code thing? Well, first of all, stop clicking next if you're installing any database technology. Basically, treat your SQL Server install and config as code. Containers, the cloud, desired state configuration, Terraform, Ansible, these should not be foreign terms to you. And basically, we want to be doing more of this and less of this. Now, those of you that are observant will go, well, hang about, Hamish, you're talking about installing IIS here. That's fine in application development. I run SQL Server or I run some form of database management technology. Well, we can do the same. And, we can provision our SQL Server via code. And the funny thing is, I do a lot in Terraform from a professional perspective, and sometimes I basically write in Terraform all day, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, horses for courses, right? Whatever you need to do, but the main thing is being able to provision your data store in whatever way that is scalable. And you clicking next ain't scalable. So here's some technologies that I might use in a given day. I may be writing in Terraform. I may be writing in a whole heap of different technologies, right? So my machine learning model might be using Python and SQL Server. And the funny thing is, I may be using JSON to actually monitor my SQL instance. I guess the common theme here is data, right? All the way through these different languages that I've learned, the underlying thing is the ability to provision data. Alrighty, we're not too far, don't worry. Operational visibility. There are some great tools out there, and yes, I am a friend of Redgate. Redgate have a brilliant tool that you can go look at, but there are other tools out there as well. This ain't a Redgate sales thing. Being able to look at what is going on in our real estate is fantastic. But, Azure SQL Analytics, gives me a whole heap of metrics and things that I can go and actually understand what is going on in my system. Alrighty, bring it all together. Look, the landscape has changed in the past few years. We're not just administrating databases, we're actually engineering a platform dedicated to serving and processing and, analyzing data. We need to ensure reliability because here's the deal. I don't know if you know, but chaos and risk, they're not generally great for databases. I always used to say to management, look, if a web server goes down, it's just a DLL at the end of the day. We'll just build that, chuck it in. We don't have the same ability with data because not only is it about how the data changed, but it's around the state of that data. And so we need to, ensure that we have reliability. Virtualization, infrastructure as code, containers, serverless computing. It's never serverless. It's always a server somewhere. Cloud and distributed systems. These are all now commonplace, and we need to embrace aspects of these, and more importantly, bring our databases into these paradigms. The cloud is fine, but we need to still understand how we are operating our databases or data stores so that we're not, consuming thousands of dollars a day because we spun up Databricks and we, put it on the premium level. We may not need the premium level. There is still the requirement to optimize how we run the data platform that we engineer. We need to break down the barriers, right? So we need to be we need to have a voice at the table, and we need to understand engineering principles, because those principles will allow us to appreciate and realize some of the benefits, where we have the definition of our databases, our data stores, what have you, in code, means that we can spin up things like that. We're not, sitting in front of a screen clicking next, or we're not, we have shifted the paradigm to where automation is, our best friend. Too often I deal with clients who have no idea what's running. And so monitoring and operational visibility is key for us doing data-driven decisions. And this is more around what is actually happening. So I guess at the end of the day, is the DBA extinct? No, it's not. We need the best DBAs to work with engineering teams and to evolve to being database reliability engineers. But sometimes you've got to pay the mortgage, right? And this was something that I've changed, obviously, aspects of this. But I put this slide in about 2 hours ago, because a lot of my day at the moment is spent writing in this query language. And for those of you that are observant, yes, it's Jira or JQL. And if you told me, even a year ago that I'd spend most of my day writing JQL, I would have laughed and told you to leave the room. But, writing in JQL, why do I write in that? Because they know that the particular client knows that I'm good at data. I understand how to write a query language or two. And by writing JQL derives business value for them, massive amount of value. They are now they're making data-driven decisions based on the JQL I write, which is crazy. And to be honest, JQL, I'd actually rather be writing in KQL. And I've been lucky enough, I look a bit nicer there. Don't know what's going on with the hair though. KQL, right? Custo query language, another language that I've written in specifically in Azure. Custo query language is so powerful. If you are doing anything in Azure, you need to learn KQL. And so Google KQL and Hamish Watson. There's a couple of cool videos out there. Lastly, if you don't think that database reliability engineering is a thing, let me put it this way. If Kendra Little is talking about this and doing some of the great designs that she does, I realize I've talked way too long, so I don't have too much time on this slide. But basically, at the premise of this, and by the way, there is the link to the particular image that I borrowed off Kendra. At the trash is basically how our data is stored, secured, shared, backed up, queried, and archived. And basically all of these animals here, they use SQL, right? Structured query language of some sort. And look, I always think if Kendra's talking about something, it's something that I should have a look at, because Kendra is like, I once called Kendra the Edmund Hillary of data, because Edmund Hillary, being a wonderful New Zealander, was the first person to climb Mount Everest. And, gender aside, Kendra is on top of the mountain of all things data and DevOps. So I think if she's talking about it, we definitely should check it out. But yeah, thank you for this session. Appreciate, spending some time talking to you. I've got 10 minutes or so, or however long you want. I'm not really going anywhere, because if I go anywhere, I'm going to have to write more Jira query language. Those are my details. I guess the only detail that's important is the last one, which is around make stuff go. I've approached data the way I approached when I was working with application software, in that I want to deliver value to the end user. The reason being, end user or clients pay us. The rows and columns, the ones and zeros, it's just a means of getting there. But at the end of the day, if we can deliver quicker and more reliably than anyone else, it means our clients are going to pay us more, and we're going to make a heap of money and keep our jobs. Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I see my good mate Warwick's there. There you go.
Thank you, Hamish. Thank you for a fantastic session. So, everybody, we do have time, as Hamish said, to ask questions. If you've got a question, feel free to either put it in the chat, raise your hand in here, or even come off of mute, and you can ask Hamish a question directly yourself, just like you would in an in-person event if you happen to be in Christchurch. So, Hamish, I know you and I have known each other a wee while.
8 years.
So, with this, you did mention about the whole DevOps approach and how do you get started, etc. Right? And yes, there's tooling involved. What would you say would be the best approach for someone? Is it to pick a tool and try and learn it, or pick a process and try and see how that fits into your current work environment?
When I talk to DevOps stuff, I always put up this big periodic table of all the software, right, that you can use if you want to embrace, DevOps and go along and do all this. And it's extensive, right? There's, do I learn Terraform? Do I learn PowerShell? Do I learn Ansible? Do I learn insert any form of technology, right? And it can be daunting. And what I always say to people is find something that you're comfortable. Like the first time I actually automated the backup of a database, I didn't use TSQL. I used PowerShell. And the reason being is because I was working with a team at the time who were very good PowerShell people. And so they nutted out how to automatically back up a database via an application deployment, which at the time, like this is 2012, was groundbreaking, right? Now, if I said to any DBA, hey, guess what? I managed to automate a database backup, they'd just laugh at me. They'll be like, well, you just automated something you should be able to do all day and every day. And I'll be like, yeah, but it was part of an application deployment because it needed to back up the database. And so I guess the answer that I would give to people is start with the process. The process is key. You can have the best tools, but if your process is disjointed or manual and your people or your team don't get it, you can have the best tools in the world and you will still have massive problems. The process and culture around that process is what will define success, because I've used a whole heap of tools in my career, but the underlying thing has been the process of ensuring not only that we can back something up and restore it, not only can we build something, but we can monitor it, and not only can we build something, but we can release it reliably, efficiently, and better than the rest. So the process is the thing. You can choose whatever tool you want. I don't mind. Just embrace those principles of standardization, automation, reliability, and monitoring.
And then just to take that a little bit further, if you were in an environment where you're wanting to get started on that journey, but you hit roadblocks or pushbacks on, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do this. We need to do that. How would you possibly recommend somebody to start that journey of not only enlightening themselves, but getting that to the blockers that they're facing in their environment?
I have two answers. One is more humorous than the other. I guess at the end of the day, you need both camps in this situation, or both teams, or both whatevers, need to understand each other. And this came about, when I worked with DBAs back in the day, they didn't understand why I wanted to automate things. They actually thought that I was trying to automate them out of a job. It wasn't. I was trying to automate them so that all the drudgery and horridness was gone and they could focus on higher level activities. And if a team is throwing up, or manager is throwing up blockers, you need to actually understand why. And sometimes you don't have that ability. And one of the best things I've found in my career is finding a sponsor. So when I would work on a project of automation or delivery, whatever, I would try and find someone that would act as my sort of sponsor or go-between, someone who had sort of some of that, and I hate to use the word, but sort of corporate political nous, who could actually take what we were doing and translate it to upper levels of management. And I did a session years ago on, how to make DevOps work in a corporate culture, because often people will see what you're doing as a threat. And what you need to do is be able to articulate the benefits of that. And it's hard, right? Because we're all data people. We're down here making sure stuff goes at a data level. Being able to articulate and say that to a senior manager level, that is taking you out of your comfort zone. And I 100% acknowledge that that's hard. But find someone who can. And the way that you describe it is, again, around that value that we are delivering. We are going to do things more reliably. We're going to do things using automation and then leverage that person. Funnily enough, and this goes against everything you probably think is true, I have used sales and marketing people to my advantage, because here's the deal. If we can deliver something, the salespeople love that, because it means that they can sell stuff quicker. The marketing people love it because they can leverage what we're doing into a story. The best two people who can sell a story? Sales and marketing people. And early on in my career, I actually made a point of talking to those people. I think of salespeople as biggest liars ever. But if they're, being able to take my story and use it to sell that value to the company, I'm okay if they tell a half truth. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're liars. But, the person who put this in, DevOps is like any change management strategy in an organization, 100%. Find someone who can help you tell that story. So this is where it gets humorous. This is the second part of the story. Over the past 6 years, I've had a number of people message me. I once worked with a team in Sweden, never actually met them. And basically, I did this from a community perspective, because I have, banks and insurance companies and multinationals who pay my mortgage. But I like to help people who are struggling. So if you're struggling to define that story, you got my details today. I'm happy to do an hour or two of my time on a call to help you describe what you want to do for upper management and stuff, It makes my day seeing people being able to take a brilliant idea of using standardization, automation, reliability, monitoring, and all those things, and being able to word it to make, the upper echelons in the company understand it. I know how to translate it because I used to be a senior manager. I know the terminology and, more importantly, the wins that they're after. So you get an hour or two of my time. If you ever need it, I'm here, because if it makes stuff go, I'm 100% on board.
Excellent. Thank you, Hamish. So does anybody have any other questions? I know there's been some comments, but if you've got a question, now's your time to take advantage and ask Hamish and learn from his vast experience and knowledge. See somebody's typing. If not, then we will finish off very shortly and let everybody continue back with their day. So, Max, can you please provide your details again?
Yeah, sure. Let me. Where is my presentation? Actually, I'll just type my email. Oh my goodness, I can't spell.
Now, if anybody on this call knows of Buck Woody, Hamish is breaking all of the rules right now according to Buck Woody and presentations. You do not type in presentations because it's easy to make mistakes.
100%. I'll just make sure, all that. Oh, and this is the other important one. If people, I'm still using Twitter these days. Who knows for how long? I'm still on. Yeah, the X. Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, those are my details there. I like helping people, so go for God.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Hamish, for giving up your time and supporting our meetup group and providing your knowledge to everybody who has been here today, but also for those that get to come back and watch this recording on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel. So with that, I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody. Thank you, Hamish. Thank you, Martin. Take care, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you all online next month.
All right.
Cheers, Hamish. Thanks, everyone. Catch you later. Bye.
Cheers, Warwick.